Hey guys, Brett Tremblay here. We're back talking more about the Tiger King. And in today's episode, the second of our two-part series, we're going to discuss how Carole Baskin and Big Cat Rescue got Joe for over $1 million and, in my opinion, caused such financial pressure that it led to Joe's horrible decision one after another and eventually him losing the entire zoo. So let's rock and roll. At our law firm, we've handled hundreds of commercial matters such as this one, and every case is different, but man, were some big mistakes made by Joe Exotic. So today, we're gonna be talking about the 5 major mistakes that Joe Exotic made. And before we get into it any further though, we're gonna go ahead and give you our spoiler alert. Alright, so you've been properly warned. Now, in the first video in the series, we talk about the underlying lawsuit, and today what we're going to do is talk about what happens next. How do you chase someone down? How do you grab their assets if they're trying to hide those assets? Or on the other side, what you can do if you owe somebody that kind of money, how you can better protect your assets. So where we pick up this video today is right after the lawsuits end, and we know that Joe Exotic owes Carole Baskin and Big Cat Rescue over $1 million. But we also know that Joe didn't have the money.
She had to result into financially draining us.
So if you have a court judgment on somebody and they are claiming that they don't have the money and they're showing you bank accounts that are empty or have very little money, what do? And here, what we see is that Carole Baskin and Big Cat Rescue take the judgment from the Florida courts and go all the way into Oklahoma and do what's called domesticate the judgment. That means that they filed an action in Oklahoma saying, one of your sister courts already gave us a judgment. We just need you to authenticate it here in Oklahoma so that we can start the collection process here. And that's where you see in the documentary the list of assets that Joe had to turn over to Carole Baskin and Big Cat Rescue. The court is going to make you fill out a fact information sheet and disclose everything you own, the bank accounts, the houses, the properties, in this case, the animals, and you're going to have to just give a whole exhaustive list and turn over everything that you and your businesses own and sign that under oath. And if you're caught lying under oath, obviously, there's big trouble there. But here's where the nuance is. Joe Exotic claimed he didn't own any of these things himself.
I don't own anything. This bus is not mine. Those cars are not mine. I'm not stupid.
Joe's telling us he doesn't own anything and the bus isn't his and he's laughing, but you can see the anguish that he's going through and the pain deep down that I think he knows what's coming and he's trying to put on a good face, but
you can actually pinpoint the second when his heart rips in half. And now.
So Joe's putting on a good face. He's pretending that he has everything under control, but eventually Joe just loses it. Let's watch.
He turned over what he had to, because a lot of it was possessions. She took the semi-truck and she took the tour bus, which in her opinion was a win because he couldn't do road shows anymore, now without the equipment.
Did I hear you say you wanted my f***ing watch? Really? My watch?
Any of the assets that Carole wanted his lawsuit, he would take out there and blow it up with tannerite.
Now, I've never actually seen anyone blow things up. I've never heard of tannerite before, but just more part of the crazy weirdness of this show. And there you have it. Joe starts to feel it. He starts to feel the pressure and he says, screw it. Instead of giving these things to Carole, I'm just going to start blowing them up. If I'm not going to have them, she's not going to have them. Bottom line though, we all know what happened. He loses item after item and he's under so much pressure. He has to sell the zoo so he no longer owns that. And then he drags his poor mother into the whole thing. And apparently she either goes or almost goes bankrupt. So just total devastation for Joe Exotic. And what we're going to do today is talk about the 5 major mistakes that Joe Exotic made through this entire process. So mistake number 1 that Joe Exotic made: lack of asset protection and proper corporate structuring. Without really detailed and stringent asset planning years in advance, it's really difficult to completely protect you and your family and your business from a huge court judgment such as in this case. But if Joe Exotic all along had been doing proper corporate structuring, he could have done a lot better. For example, let's say Joe put the land in a land trust. Now let's say he put the zoo itself in a separate LLC and he rented the land upon which the zoo was operated from the land trust. Now let's say he did all the operations for the zoo in a third company he called a management company. And then let's say you had the bus or any vehicles in a separate entity, as well as the traveling company in a fifth entity.
Ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that.
And you know who clearly didn't take the time for proper asset protection?
Well, obviously,
Joe Exotic. And that leads us to mistake number 2 that Joe Exotic made here, and that is what's called fraudulent transfer. Man, if I had $1 for every time we talked to somebody who was going to get sued or who had already been sued that said they won't get anything, I'll just start a new corporation and then move everything into that corporation. That is part of the fraudulent transfer rule. Every state has a rule on this. You cannot simply move around assets in order to avoid a judgment. If you have ABC company and you get sued, you can't just open up XYZ company and say, haha, you can no longer get me. And so many people think that way. Now, clearly this was Joe's big plan. He was just gonna move things around and change ownership into a bunch of different people. And we see in the documentary, they talk about what a mess it was in terms of Joe moving around the land and doing quick claim deeds and really just creating a huge, giant mess. Let's watch.
They've done so many transfers and quitclaim deeds, no one can keep track of it, not even an attorney. You can go down to the courthouse and ask, if you just say the last name Strabogel, they just take a deep breath and look at you.
Joe kept thinking if he changed the name, it would just derail him and derail him. Well, it didn't. They just moved it to another lawsuit.
And you can even see there, it says how much money that Joe was paid for something. We don't know what on the document, but it says 0 love and affection. You can't just give up an asset to somebody for nothing if someone else is making a claim at that property. And that takes us to mistake number 3. Underestimating Carol Baskin and her motivation. Despite how strongly you feel about your case and your mission, whoever's on the other side of you in a lawsuit, you have to judge their motivation and how much money they have. We see multiple times in the documentary, Carol Baskin, lover or hater, her sole mission in life is to save big cats, in her opinion, from awful existences. So she was never going to stop going after Joe Exotic. And we see that in the documentary when she's talking about how she's relentless and she'll never give up.
How much has this cost you, this lawsuit between you and Joe?
We've spent over $1 million in legal fees.
You're kidding. Is it worth it?
Well, if this were a purely commercial situation, it wouldn't. You'd say this is not economic, but this is part of our mission to put a stop to this, and we're not going to allow him to abuse the system and wear us out and cause us to go away and succeed at that.
So there you have it. Carol and her husband have already spent over $1 million suing Joe Exotic and chasing him, and they're not going to just go away at this point. And that was Joe's third mistake, is why get into such a crazy legal battle with people that A, have deep pockets, and B, are never going to give up if you poke them, because they're in it for, in their opinion, a higher and bigger purpose. And that is a scary person to have on the other side of litigation. And that leads us to mistake number 4 that Joe Exotic made, underestimating Carol Baskin's attorneys. In the documentary, I actually don't get this comment or this part at all.
I just thought she did it to make a point. Look, I'm not going to back down. You're not going to intimidate me, and you're not going to have the final word.
So the reporter's saying that a lot of people thought that this was just to prove a point and that eventually they would back down. If you've already spent $1 million, you're looking at your lawyer saying, I spent a lot of money. What have you done for me? Where is mine? And the lawyers are hugely motivated to come away with some results. What you don't want to do is spend a ton of money on a lawsuit and just have it be pointless. So Joe Exotic and his team should have known that those lawyers were going to be vicious, and apparently they were, because someone else talks about it in the documentary.
Carol Baskin's lawyers are vicious, and they go after anybody involved.
She sued me also, because I was at the zoo.
See, they just started suing everybody.
Going to be sued at the same time.
So everybody that had been involved all got drug into court.
Of course the lawyers were going to go after everybody. That's their job, and they needed to get results for Carole Baskin and Big Cat Rescue after they spent all of that money on the lawsuit itself. And that leads us to the fifth big mistake that Joe Exotic made in this process: underestimating the bankruptcy courts.
I declare bankruptcy! A
lot of people understand generally what bankruptcy is. I don't have money and I owe people money, so I'm gonna say I'm declaring bankruptcy and hopefully get myself out of a lot of trouble. However, there are a lot of nuances and rules within bankruptcy. And if you have tried to, again, going back to mistake number 2 in the fraudulent transfers, if you have moved any property around, they're going to start dragging all of those people into court, taking depositions, trying to grab property, trying to grab money. The term is claw back any money that Joe maybe moved around or even legitimately paid people. The bankruptcy attorneys are going to just hound Joe and go after anyone and everything. We see the massive collateral damage that Joe causes through the bankruptcy process.
Through the proceedings about the land and fraudulent transfer to his mother, the bankruptcy trustee went after her.
I want to thank you with my whole heart for all the support and help you have done. And I know from the bottom of my heart, Carole Baskin down in Florida is behind a lot of this because she's been harassing us right along with Joe.
I mean, it's one thing to see Joe go down, but then his mother and father, and you can see again the pain and the sheriff banging on the door demanding money. You never want to find yourself in that position. So there you have it. Those are the 5 major mistakes that Joe Exotic made once he got the $1 million judgment on him. The last thing that we want to leave you with is this.
If you've got the money, you usually find yourself on the right side.
Truer words have not been spoken. It shouldn't happen that way, but unfortunately, when you have just gobs of money to spend and just ruin somebody financially, that's the way that the court system on the civil side can work. So with that, all you Tiger King fans and perhaps a few cool cats and kittens, we bid you adieu. We hope you liked our videos, and please subscribe to the channel so we can do more of this. Like the video, leave us comments, tell us what we should have touched upon, what we covered that you liked, what you didn't like, and just give us some help and some feedback as we try to dig into more real life scenarios and take you behind the scenes of what's actually happening in a lawsuit, in legal proceedings, and what the parties are thinking and going through. Thanks so much for watching.